Brad, thanks for joining us on episode 006 of the Coded for Chaos podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Hank. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the conversation. We've known each other for a long time. Look forward to diving in.
And it's the first time you've been to my house, hanging out in my basement. It's just kind of weird. Like, it's weird for everybody when they first show up here, I admit.
Well, the weirdest part was when I walked up and you were talking from under your stairs. But yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah.
Grateful.
It forced me to get the mosquito problem under control out front because I didn't want that to swarm people as they first show up. But it's kind of our shtick, live from the basement in Washington, kind of the bunker kind of feel.
All right, it works.
Well, yes, like you mentioned, Brad and I worked at Booz Allen together for a long time. We've worked continuously after that for 10 years in various different forms with from a venture side, working with Booz Allen. We've helped spin a company out of Booz Allen, Snap Attack. I forget how many years ago that was, 5 years ago. Booz Allen is just a really interesting place. And I think it's a kind of a mystery to a lot of people outside of the Beltway. People hear about it. So I want to kind of unpack a little bit about that today. I know what I know from 10 years ago and from what I know now. And let's start off with like the kind of the beginnings, the origins of Booz Allen, 1914, kind of the first management consulting firm, all the way to like where it is today.
Yeah, Booz Allen has been around for 110 years and, deep roots in the U.S. government. I think our longest standing customers, the United States Navy. Through our history, we've done things that are quite interesting that folks probably don't even recognize. One, Booz Allen helped define and organize the NFL as it exists today. We kind of pioneered supply chain logistics, and we have been sort of at the epicenter of cybersecurity for over 30 years. And so it's been I've been at Booz Allen for almost 29 years, and so I've been a part of just a small part of that long journey. But it's been cool to watch the transformation of the organization, and we've evolved, as has our customers, and we've been part of multiple tech revolutions, which has been exciting.
Yeah. So you will hear about this term, the defense industrial base,
Yeah.
And what that means. And do you get Booz is a part of that, right? For somebody that doesn't understand, or do you feel like it's kind of adjacent to that, or how does it kind of fit?
We are part of the defense industrial base. Booz Allen is probably $11 billion business. A large majority of our work is with the U.S. federal government, and a big part of that is with the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. And so, what I love about Booz Allen and what has kept me at Booz Allen for a long time is the fact that we're a mission-centric company, and we have a passion for national security. Feel like we're in the fight every day, helping support our customers, defend the nation, and so we're definitely part of the industrial base. Although I will say that when you think of Booz Allen, you think of big defense and federal government contractor. We also do a lot of work across the Global 500. We have a very large commercial business, heavily focused on cybersecurity, but also artificial intelligence. We do incident response, we do SOC modernization, we do zero trust. We're huge, and we support all 16 U.S. critical infrastructure sectors. Even from that perspective, our purpose and our mission is securing our clients, which ultimately is national security. And so the businesses are very interconnected.
Yeah. So when I worked at Booz, I was always amazed at kind of like how valuable it was to be an outsider looking into an organization, like unique perspective. What are some of the unique perspectives that you find that Booz Allen customers get from an outsider's perspective? Because they're very, they're in the mission every day, kind of focused on one thing. Booz Allen is commercial, it's federal, it's across all the different agencies, so it can bring different perspectives. Like, what are some of the more unique perspectives you can bring to it?
Yeah, I mentioned, some of the work that we do commercially. So a couple of things. One, we do probably around 1,000 incident response engagements every year. And so we are, responding to ransomware attacks, nation state attacks on critical infrastructure. And so we really get a broad view of the adversary across what we call the battle space. The other piece is, because we support Global 500, because we do 1,000 incident response, we support the Department of Defense, we support the intelligence community, we support civilian agencies. And so we talk about, we have the ability to meet the adversary where they are across this one holistic battle space. And so, I think that, because we have such a broad purview of what's happening in terms of the threat space, we're able to kind of connect the dots. And, Hank, you and I worked together in the Intel space for a long time, and we talk about like tipping and queuing. And so we're able to see what's happening over here, which is a leading indicator in cases of what may be happening in other parts. And so one, I think we're able to bring unique perspectives around the adversary. The second thing is, different customers are at different levels of adoption around different emerging tech. The Department of Defense, for example, has been, paving the way for scaled zero trust implementation. And we're working a big program there called Thunderdome. And, we're helping to transform and modernize DoD's infrastructure to implement zero trust principles to be more secure. Now, we're able to take the insights that we get there and take that commercially, to take that into the civilian sector. And so I think the fact that we look at this as one battle space, that we work across, we're able to see threat actors and tip and queue. We're able to, really look at best practices in the application of emerging tech and be able to kind of, bring that to bear in different ways. And so, I think that our view across this broad space gives us, the ability to move fast and I think really serve our customers well.
So that kind of goes to the my next question is around prioritizing threats. And we're sitting here on 9/11, sort of, after 9/11, I remember as a country we brought together, we had to get so creative. We even brought in like Walt Disney to help us think about, imagine things that could happen with the next, like, over the horizon. And we're still, to a certain extent, still waiting for that cyber equivalent of 9/11 to happen. So you touched on it, tipping and queuing and things like that. I know Booz Allen's big into the threat intel space. What are some ways you guys are helping clients that have a myriad of challenges that they're facing prioritize those threats so they could focus on the most important ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually, the hardest problem I think that that our whole industry faces, right? Is, cybersecurity is, we are in a forever war. It's not like you're going to make an investment and the problem's going to go away, right? We've seen this in the global war on terrorism. We've seen this in, with other nation states. It's everyone continues to invest, continue to involve their TTPs based upon what you do. And so in cybersecurity, we're in this, continued fight that's not going to go away. From an investment perspective and, priority perspective, I think one is our clients our customers have a tremendous amount of technical debt. And so I think step one is, how do you buy down some of that technical debt? Because, you walk into a manufacturing facility and you're looking at Windows NT operating systems, right? 1995. Just so happens that I'm an expert in Windows NT, which is kind of unfortunate, but
they put you to work on that.
Yeah. It's like the Smithsonian of IT in a lot of these environments. So there's a lot of tech debt. And so I think, one is, implementing, we're seeing a lot of focus around infrastructure modernization, movement to the cloud, adopting zero trust principles. And, I think that's making a big impact. We're also seeing now, folks starting to look at ask the strategic question, right? AI is accelerating. Agentic AI is ultimately going to provide a tremendous amount of workforce automation. Our spend around SOX and security automation has continued to, increase over the years. How do we start to apply sort of AI fundamentals to some of our critical mission areas, not only to be more efficient, but to be more effective and be able to move faster? And so, we're seeing a lot of movement in that space. We're getting a lot of questions around post-quantum, and that's an interesting dilemma in terms of, when do you invest, how do you invest, where do you focus? And I think a lot of our customers now are really just starting to bound and understand what they have in their environment. And so, it's sort of an arms race in cyber. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea continue to grow in sophistication. There's a lot of emerging tech, and how do you sort through the noise? How do you prioritize your investment, and where do you focus? And for us, it's about the fundamentals, right? Let's modernize the infrastructure. Let's move our mentality from protecting, building big moats and protecting the castle walls to assuming that the adversaries in your environment implement zero trust principles. And then how do we really kind of move the needle from an AI perspective? I spoke at the Billington cybersecurity event this morning, and with the acting director of CISA, and they were talking about AI programs and policies. And the reality is, it's easy to say adopt AI, and if you go out to RSA, there's 6,000 companies, and the joke I made was 3,000 of them are AI, 3,000 of them are zero trust. And so the question is, like, if I'm sitting in the seat of a CISO, I'm overwhelmed. And so I think it's about sort of picking select use cases, moving out with practical implementations, and having a roadmap that you can build incremental improvements.
What do you think this quantum inflection date? People like to try to pick a year where everything's gonna change, and I've heard even as near out as 2030 or things like that. What's kind of the number that's floating around in your head around?
I think the reality is we don't know. I mean, some of the early NIST documents talked about 2034. The national security systems are certainly probably need to move to the left. I think the reality is that whether it's post-quantum or just breaking encryption, our adversaries, take quantum off the table. Our adversaries have skilled mathematicians trying to break, the foundational algorithms of encryption. And so, I think that we need to assume that it's going to happen. I think, knowing your environment is probably most important. And, but I think that it's a hard problem because in cyber, you have so many priorities. Where do you really kind of place your chips, because you can't do everything.
Yeah, on the commercial side, you touched on it. The average Fortune, we did a little bit of research on it. Like the average Fortune 1000 CISO has 150 vendors in their ecosystem.
Yeah.
Like, how do you manage 150 different vendors? I mean, it's mostly guys like me's fault for investing in a million different companies or do like one single thing, and then they have to cobble all these single things together. But most of the CISOs, I think we talked to, probably you talk to now on the commercial side, and even in the federal space, probably, they want to go from 150 vendors down to like 30 or 40 or, preferably 10 or something like that, and it put things into a platform so they don't have to do vendor management, they don't have to manage individual tools and things like that. So we're riding that wave as well.
So I think I heard you say that you're part of the problem. So I'd like to make sure I
I've been a part of the problem for a long time.
I know that. The other, I reflected on a conversation, as you said, that I was thinking about a conversation I had with a CISO one time, and I think they had 50 or 60 tools in their environment. I'm like, well, which ones are you going to retire? Because you're spending all your money on O&M and sustainment, and it's just the price is going to continue to escalate. And their comment was, well, I'm not going to turn any of them off because I haven't been breached, and if I turn one off, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
huge problem, right?
Yeah.
And so we've seen emerging markets around sort of the attack simulation technologies, being able to assess the effectiveness of tools. I think that's interesting. You in your other hat, in the VC world, everyone's planting seeds in lots of kind of small startups. And the question is, at what point do they start to kind of consolidate into bigger platforms that reduce some of the burden in the integration costs on the CISOs? It's just a hard problem.
Yeah, and we've been, to a certain extent, there's, like you mentioned, there's 3,000 companies doing AI and 3,000 companies doing zero trust. At some point, we have to start thinking about doing something else. And like, I know it's a touchy subject. We talked, but at Billington conference here in Washington that's going on right now, just yesterday, there was a discussion around marks of war in private industry, where private companies can hack back, talking about this. This has been floated around for a long time. This was back, it goes all the way back to fighting pirates back in the day.
Yeah.
And, it's very controversial giving a private industry the some sort of like ability or sanctioning their ability to hack back. But there are like there's some there's some softer ways of doing that. If a friend of ours, Jeff Longelhofer, even recently at Coinbase, when they had a major social engineering attack, they flipped the script on the bad guy and put a bounty on the bad guy. So there was a ransom on put on Coinbase, and then Coinbase said, okay, how about this? How about we set up a $50 million ransom for whoever can find this bad guy? So there's creative ways of doing these sorts of things that I think.
Did it work?
I he's sort of the hero of the battle right now in the CISO world for what he's done.
Yeah.
I don't know that they've actually caught the bad guy and anybody's collected their $50 million ransom, but that could be happening in crypto and we don't even know about it. Right?
Yeah. New business model.
New business model.
Yeah. The whole hack back thing, and I know there's a lot of debate on that. It's such a slippery slope. And, what happens when, someone that doesn't know what they're doing hacks back and, causes major outages on the internet or, unanticipated, collateral damage to
shuts down the 911 system in Europe or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Super dangerous.
Super dangerous. Yep. It's way different than kinetic, sort of posse comitatus kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
So, Silicon Valley, it's got its origins of Silicon Valley were founded on working with the DoD very closely, and the creation of the internet, and that kind of like supercharged Silicon Valley. And then somewhere along the way, Silicon Valley kind of lost its way, and it wasn't cool to work with the Department of Defense anymore. And it was way more cool to build a food delivery app or a photo sharing app or something like that. And now we've got a million of those things. And some of the smartest people in the world, most of the smartest people in the world, are focused on that right now, building something outside of this. That seems to be changing a bit now. Where does Booz Allen play in that process? I know you guys have a presence in the Valley and in San Francisco, and you have for some time, and you have your own venture arm now, and you have DarkLabs.
Yep.
How's Booz Allen playing in that transformation?
Well, maybe we start a little bit with kind of some of my origin story and history. And so, I've been in the tech field for almost 30 years. And, back in the first .com boom in the late 90s, I was traveling around the world and building .coms, and, working with, big Fortune 100 companies who were concerned that this thing called the internet was going to disrupt their business. Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then September 11th happened. And when September 11th happened, and today is the anniversary of September 11th, it changed the whole world. And within a very short period of time, I stopped building .coms, and I had the opportunity to go work with the DoD and the intelligence community. I got a clearance, and I went from traveling the world building startups to working in a SCIF. And my role at the time was actually to bring commercial speed. And as I was building .coms, I actually spent a ton of time in Silicon Valley working with a lot of startups at the time. But I was asked to not only bring a new way of thinking about how the defense and the intelligence community could build software and kind of early versions of Agile, things that we learned building .coms at pace, but also the community wanted us to bring some of that Silicon Valley mentality, some of that Silicon Valley tech into the defense and the intelligence community. And we've been on that journey for 25 years. I've seen, with the new administration, I think we've had some great successes over the years. And, in cases you see good ideas coming out of government and getting commercialized. In other cases, you see commercial tech coming into the government and kind of transforming mission and operations. But today, I think we're at an inflection point, and I'm seeing it hyper accelerate. This administration's focus around product and commercial tech is really sort of igniting the transformation. And we're seeing Palantir and Anduril and Shield AI and all these really interesting companies now really drive new capabilities at pace and bring American innovation into the Department of Defense, which is our nation's competitive advantage, right? If we are going to maintain our top position on the world stage, it can't just be the Department of Defense. We need to leverage the best of our entrepreneurship and our innovation across our country. And so, one, I see a lot of focus and around defense tech and bring new ideas. And I think it's encouraging.
What are some ways for startups? So I live in a startup world. Typically I advise that startups in our ecosystem to go sell to 15 banks before they try to sell to the government, because it's just too for a Series Seed, Series A company. It's daunting. It's like, okay, go talk to Brad, man. Get on his radar, right? And then wait till you have 4 or 5 bank customers, and then figure out how to maybe break your way into Army. I think that's Army, whatever, whoever the government, name the government client.
Yeah.
I think that's changing a bit. What are some ways that earlier stage companies can more quickly build trusted technology?
Yeah.
So that maybe like a Booz Allen could be comfortable with them, or even direct sell to the government, which there are just pathways to that opening up.
Yeah, sure. I think that I think it's important, I think, to narrow this conversation on cybersecurity, because in defense tech, you have Silicon Valley investing in building drones and other capabilities directly for the Department of Defense.
Right.
In cybersecurity in general, you don't see a lot of VCs and others investing in just cybersecurity capabilities for the U.S. government. And the reality is, we talked about one battle space, right? If China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they're just as interested in, attacking, the U.S. critical infrastructure, whether it's utilities or manufacturing or financial services, as they are the defense network,
right,
and the DoD and the intelligence community networks. And so the reality is, in cybersecurity, you invest once and you scale it across the market. I think one of the problems that, a couple of things as startups look to work with companies like Booz Allen and the U.S. federal government. One is, be true, really have a focus around solving sort of a priority mission problem, and, really have a clear understanding of the use case and the problem that you're trying to solve, and, the impact that your product can make. There's a lot of good ideas, but aligning them to a critical use case or mission problem, I think is really critical. The other thing that I see with a lot of startups is, coming into U.S. federal government, there's a higher bar for security standards of your tech.
Yeah.
And we saw it with SolarWinds, right? Tech can become the attack vector. And so, making sure that you're baking in security and raising the bar in terms of the cybersecurity standards that you implement in your product suite when you build it, because it will help you then transition that into the government space, which tends to have a higher standards. Although I do think that as we see more and more supply chain attacks, that collective standard for security of the product is going to get higher. The other piece you mentioned, financial services, I appreciate that. As we've looked over the years, I mean, you and I were involved in building an open source cyber threat intelligence capability, and who was our first customer, right? And they were financial services, right? And because the financial services at the time, probably still are from a commercial critical infrastructure perspective, are the most mature, are the most sophisticated. And if you can solve their problem, if you can meet their standard, if you can meet their scrutiny, then it's much easier to scale across other sectors and then come into the U.S. federal government.
Yeah. What is internally to Booz Allen? You guys create amazing products, and sometimes they only see the light of day with your customers. But you've done a lot of work over the last few years to shine a light on these products, the DarkLabs, take them out of the the inner workings of Booz Allen to the outside world. What are some things that are in the pipeline there? I know you unveiled something at Black Hat.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was really cool. I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about those few things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for asking that. So we stood up DarkLabs, and DarkLabs for us is a way to take some of our talent that's working the most essential national missions and pull them out of that and give them the opportunity to be entrepreneurial, to innovate. And so we take our top talent and we take our hardest problems that our customers are facing, and we put them into DarkLabs and turn the blender on and allow them to innovate and build capability and build IP around these hard problems. Some things that have come out of DarkLabs over the years is some of the early capabilities around OT security.
Yeah.
We had one of the first industry's first threat hunting capability. We built a capability called Snap Attack that started to look less like a Booz Allen service offering and more like a product. And that was a great story because, we had an amazing team that built this capability called Snap Attack. We went into the commercial market and the government market, and we built a baseline. We tested it with customers. We had, a foundational kind of ARR, and then we worked with, yourself and others to actually accelerate that, and it became a standalone company. The team did a successful exit back in February, and it was acquired by Cisco, and they are now, Snap Attack is now what, Cisconian Splunkers?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And so, for us, we've been in the cybersecurity fight for over 30 years, deeply entrenched in the defense and the intelligence community. And so we have a lot of insights in terms of how adversaries operate, what are some of the over the horizon trends. And DarkLabs gives us the ability to offer a great employee value proposition where our folks can have the opportunity to innovate, have the opportunity to be entrepreneurial, and really still stay in mission because they're working hard problems. And out of that comes products and new capabilities. And so we think that gives us a unique position in the market, in terms of, being different, but still being tied to mission. If you look at what the Israelis have done, there's probably, 600 plus cybersecurity startups coming out of Israel. And a lot of them have that kind of tradecraft that they're codifying in cyber defense solutions that are really exquisite and, drive a lot of actually what we see now coming into the U.S. And, we think that we offer kind of a similar value proposition there. At Black Hat, you mentioned that we released something called Velux Reverser, and that actually came out of a research project that we were working with from a Pathfinder perspective in the Department of Defense, applying agentic AI to cybersecurity. The use case we were working is more edge-based processing, but as some of our analysts started, experimenting with agentic AI, they applied it to the malware analysis use case, and we saw something that was extremely, time intensive that would take many analysts many hours, be able to compress that down into minutes. And we recognized hey, this actually would provide value not just to us in supporting our customers, but the broader community. And so we launched it as a product.
Yeah, I was excited to see that because it was like a powered by Booz Allen. Everybody's sort of advocating for that for a long time. I felt that's a really it was its own. It stood alone by itself, like a product stood alone by itself.
Yeah,
by Booz Allen. So that was good to see. It was cool.
Part of being a 110-year-old company is evolving with the market.
Yeah,
right.
Was it from the frozen suit to the latest product at Black Hat?
Right. Yeah. So it was a big step.
You got me thinking about one thing. I'm a big advocate for this. I think the Israeli model it works primarily because Israel is such a small place, and you have VCs and defense contractors and consulting companies and the military all in a very condensed area with a highly educated population. And the missing ingredient kind of here in the DC metro region for that is the venture capital partner, because most people don't know a venture capital firm here in DC, although we're one of a few. There aren't a ton. That kind of innovation happens a lot out west and in concentrations of places in Austin, Texas, and Boston, and other places where there are a lot of VCs. I feel like we have a unique opportunity here in the DC area. I think Booz Allen could play a big part of this to create more of an ecosystem like that, where things come out of the defense industry and get commercialized a lot quicker if we had more access to venture capital funding, which I know Booz Allen has his own venture capital arm and others. So we're that's a big part of our passion project at Strategic Cyber Ventures right now, is to focus on that. I mean, as the DC economy changes, they need to look for things like this, not just DC, Maryland and Virginia. So excited to hopefully work with you and Booz Allen on that.
Yeah, there's so much amazing talent that hands on keyboard, hands on mission every day in this region, and it's inspiring. They have so many amazing ideas.
Yeah.
And I think if we can empower them, if we can unlock them, if we can unleash that talent and that tradecraft, then some good capability is going to come out of that.
Yeah. Workforce. You guys have one of the largest workforces in cyber. I mean, we literally, I think at one point, probably still do, when I was there, we had one of the biggest, Booz Allen, one of the biggest cyber armies in the world. I mean, it's not some army, but that's what I called it. Some of them, it was like the biggest concentration of cyber talent around. And I think that's still the case to this day. I mean, Booz Allen's a much bigger place even today, and you guys do commercial and federal and all that kind of stuff. Like, what does that look like in the age of AI, where AI is changing everything? How is that workforce evolving, and what are you guys doing to kind of evolve with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when you look at sort of the composition of any cyber workforce, because cyber is really a multidisciplinary sport. And so on any cyber team, you're going to have reverse engineers. You may have, threat intelligence analysts. You may have, folks doing embedded systems, data scientists, software developers. And so, I mean, the trend over the last, X number of years has been, that there's not like a cybersecurity skill. It's really a multidisciplinary team working together in the battle space around the cybersecurity mission to bring their superpowers to bear to kind of collectively solve the problem. So I think that we've already seen this sort of, shift in skills. And then as you move into the like OT world, we've seen, more kind of mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, industrial engineers, right? And so we've seen that diversify. Now in the age of AI, we're seeing, mathematicians and computer scientists and data scientists take a much more prevalent role. And so I think that we're going to continue to see, the magic is being able to task organize all of these different multidisciplinary skill sets to solve a problem. Now, as we kind of are entering, and it's actually pretty remarkable, right? How old is ChatGPT?
3 years, yeah.
So like the reality is, if it was a human, it wouldn't even be a preschool yet, right? And but this, we are hyper accelerating in terms of AI adoption, and I think that the future is going to be everything is going to be AI. Whether you're building software. My son's a sophomore data scientist at Baylor University, and he took all the entry level programming, computer science classes, and I'm like, you're probably never going to write a line of code in your life, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be using, AI assisted
vibe coding or what?
AI assisted, IDEs or vibe coding or whatever. It's like it's pretty cool. And so I think that the workforce of the future is going to be well equipped to use AI regardless of their function.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think, in terms of as an industry, we shouldn't fear AI. We've got to embrace, ruthlessly and relentlessly just embrace it, right? And it shouldn't be about, hey, well, it's going to impact this job. It's going to be like, all right, well, how is it going to make us better? And let's use it to because our adversary. I mean, the adversary always gets a vote, and our adversary, China, Russia, heavily investing in artificial intelligence, and they're not just using it for cyber defense, right? They're going to use artificial intelligence in the cyber domain to attack, to impose cost against us. And we've got the only way that we're going to keep pace is to accelerate and embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that, not that long ago when people were talking about, when right after ChatGPT became publicly available, people were like, let's hold on, let's pause, let's take a big pause. And like, our adversaries aren't pausing. They're moving forward at like light speed. So they're not going to listen to your pause. That's not going to happen. We have to, as a country, be full on like steer the narrative around this thing, or we're going to like lose the next conflict. We can talk more about that in a minute. I also feel like, we need to do a better job. I don't love your thoughts on this. We need to do a better job of explaining to the American people who the adversary really is. Like, for a long time in cyber, people were saying attribution doesn't really matter. It's just about like taking the indicators of compromise and stopping the next thing. I think we have to do a better job of explaining who the adversary really is, because that makes it real to everybody. In the Cold War, we knew who the adversary was.
You know,
and we talked about it all the time.
I'll date myself a little bit, but growing up in the 80s, I remember watching the movie Rocky IV.
Right.
And everyone's sitting in the movie theater yelling like USA,
Yeah.
USA, right? And if you ask anyone in my generation who was the adversary or who was the biggest threat to us as a nation, it was Russia.
Right.
It was no ifs, ands, or buts, right? We knew the threat, we knew the adversary. Today, I just don't think as a nation, collectively, us in national security, I think we have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Right. But as a nation, holistically, I don't think we see that. And I remember speaking with someone on from the White House years ago, and I asked the question, like, the problem continues to escalate, right? Full Typhoon, China staging capability in our critical infrastructure to inflict damage and harm against our country, right? That's like a red line. And I said, how are we going to what can we do to kind of, how do we move forward as a nation? He's like, it starts with actually recognizing and making sure that the public understands what is the threat.
Yeah.
And so I think that's huge.
Well, Hollywood played a big part back in the day. Like
Yeah.
they were a big part of it. You talked about with Rocky, and now it's kind of like a nebulous adversary a lot of times in movies. So
Yeah. What in Top Gun Maverick, it was like it was unnamed.
right, like threat of Stan. But just keep it kind of totally benign. It was it was weird because it was like a cold place, it was a hot place. You couldn't really figure out where they were. Creating a culture inside of a workforce. Such a big workforce. You manage such a big team. Like what are some of the best practices for maintaining a positive culture, especially in cyber? Because sometimes in cyber, it gets hard. You have teams that are in the trenches, like grinding it out.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, a couple of things I think as that we try to focus on. In the beginning, I used the term one battle space, and that really means the adversary is looking at us holistically, and there's the commercial world, there's the defense world, the intelligence community, the civilian federal sector. And one of the things that we try to do from a value proposition perspective is allow our talent to be able to move across that battle space to work on different engagements.
Yeah.
And so a lot of folks that are, in, the defense and the intelligence community working on a daily basis, they want to be able to work outside where they can have their cell phone.
Right.
And so giving them a rotation to do a commercial instant response, they're still a mission.
Yeah.
They're still, in the fight. But they see the world from a different perspective.
A lot of times it's the same adversary.
100%. 100%. And actually, it's not only this, it's the same adversary, but they see them through a different lens.
Right.
And then when they come back into those other worlds, they bring new perspectives that actually sharpen their skills. And so I think creating this environment of mobility where our talent can actually work across different engagements if they want. And it gives them just the ability to see the world and the adversary from a different view. I think the second thing, which is awesome about the cybersecurity business, is people that work in this world, feel a sense of purpose and mission.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool when you can say, hey, either I see some impact of what I've done on the news, or, that I know that when I go to bed at night, that I made the world safer. Right. And so that's really motivating for our people. And then I talked about earlier we were talking about the DarkLabs piece, but it's really important, for folks that want to innovate, that want to be entrepreneurial, unleash them and empower them.
Yeah.
I remember, when we were talking, about some of the capabilities that we've spun out into companies. Well, we wanted to do it as a firm, but the talent really wanted to do it.
Yep.
They wanted to be entrepreneurial. And so I think that we just need to meet people where they are, understand their aspirations, and then, help them get there.
Yeah. That, to me, that's always been one of the biggest value propositions of a place like Booz. It has so much diversified cyber work is, you can go into a skiff and do that mission for a while and then pop out and maybe go work from the commercial space and then go back. And you actually become more, in my opinion, you become more valuable to both sides when you have that aspect,
100%.
worked on both. Because one often views the other as more cutting edge. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But in a minimum, you're going to learn new ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And that's valuable to both sides.
And look, we see more and more breaches every day. So obviously no one's doing it perfect, right?
That's right. That's right. The future of cyber warfare. Like, what are the things that keep your customers up at night? Like, what do you think, how it's going to evolve? We've talked about on this podcast and just in other places, we've talked about, everything from will there be a separate branch of the military focused on cyber to, what, how different, if that doesn't happen, like how different cyber elements within different branches of the military now work together, how that works with an organization like CISA.
Yeah.
Should that become like a Coast Guard like entity, or more like a Space Force like entity, or all those things?
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be those things. Like, what does the future look like for American cyber?
Well, I think it's important when looking at the future of cyber is, I mentioned earlier, the adversary gets a vote. And so let's look at some of the wave tops of what's happening, right? One is our adversaries are accelerating adoption of AI. And, AI will define the future of offensive cyber from our adversary perspective. So what does that mean? They can do it at more scale. They can do it faster. And it sort of democratizes to some extent offensive cyber. And you're going to see, entities that didn't have capabilities in the past be able to have capabilities in the future. And so I think we're going to see acceleration and scale. I think the second piece is, we're in an environment where we're accelerating AI on our side too. And so what does that mean? We saw it with cloud, we saw it with SaaS, we saw it with mobile. The attack surface continues to expand. And so I think that the adversary is getting more sophisticated. They're getting capabilities that allow them to move faster at more scale. And our attack surface is now just rapidly expanding with the adoption of AI. The last piece I think that I think we're in a world that is defined by continued escalation, right? And, Hank, you and I remember years ago, we dealt with some of the earliest versions of ransomware. And, at the time, we would negotiate a single Bitcoin to unlock the machine. And that was about $3,000.
I bought the first Bitcoin ever for Booz Allen.
It's awesome.
Wish I would have kept it.
I wish you would have. I wish you would have kept all the ones. Yeah, they're probably in some storage laptop somewhere.
Yeah.
In the basement. But I would say like this continued escalation, right? We've seen Bitcoin. We've seen a lot of espionage, but now we're seeing cyber attacks for kinetic effect.
Yeah.
And just the last year, Bull Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, extreme escalation. And I think the future is going to be continually defined by adversaries seeking to understand what that red line is. And so when you look at the future of cyber, I think you got to look at, what's happening in the world. And as a nation, we're going to need to task organize, to be ready to defeat and, win in that new threat environment.
Yeah.
And I think CISA, DoD, all, the intelligence community, all working in unison. What's been cool is seeing how the collaboration across government and the recognition that, we can only win together. I think that's good.
Yeah. All right. Lightning round. What are the most overused, some of the most overused terms in cybersecurity today?
We talked about it earlier. Artificial intelligence and zero trust. I think, they're both transforming the cybersecurity world, but they're also, I think, to some extent, a little bit of an anchor for us because they're becoming, or they have become, overused buzzwords.
Yeah.
And everyone will say zero trust without a clear definition around what it actually means.
Right.
And so I think, for us as cybersecurity professionals, we've got to go a couple clicks down and create clarity around when we say zero trust, when we say artificial intelligence. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the use case we're working? And what's the value proposition it's delivering?
Awesome. Brad, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I really appreciate you walking over to the basement and coming down and talking with us. I think everyone's going to enjoy learning a lot more about where Booz Allen's going and where it's been. And I value your time today.
Awesome. Thanks, Hank. Always great to chat.